Lisa Cairns, genuinely lovely to see you. How are you?
That was an unexpected first question. How am I?
Yeah, how are you?
Well, how am I? So, yeah, the body feels really open, expanded, and there's lots of bliss and joy. There's also maybe still a waking upness. We're a little early for me. Yeah, and excitement. I'm hot. Yeah.
Well, that was a great answer. You know, very typically people skip through the how are you question straight into I'm fine, how are you? So thank you for such a comprehensive answer. That was lovely. You mentioned bliss. Is
Yeah.
this something that is perpetually present?
There's two different qualities to the bliss. So there is a perpetual like peace and a perpetual, like you could call it like an element of bliss. And then there is in the body sort of very pleasant, orgasmic, blissful feeling which comes and goes, which is sometimes more strong and less strong. But in the center of it, there is a strong sense of this divinity, which you could call bliss. But the feeling in the actual body comes and goes.
Yeah.
And grows in intensity and less intensity.
Nice. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about. I want to start with your experience in Bali because that I think sets the scene for everything that follows. Before I do that, you speak about this sort of bliss in the body. So, do you have a sense of being located and not located?
Yeah. So my my sense of experiences is very expanded. So I don't feel sort of located in the body as such. I feel like my energy feels very expanded and intimate with everything that's happening. But at the same time, there is this body in which it's looking through. So you could say expanded and not, even though I wouldn't normally say that, but that there is this place in which life is looking through, which it's not looking through the wall, it's looking through this body. But there's also this sense prior to the body of feeling intimate with everything. So it feels like the energy is very big.
Yeah. Yes. I spoke to Federico Fagin. Do you know Federico? Have you heard of Federico? So he invented the microprocessor and
Wow.
also was a key player in neural networks, which led to AI. Anyway,
Wow.
and he rose really high and was hugely lauded, understandably, but then felt dissatisfied and miserable, as is so often the case when we think that the usual status and things like that society tends to put on a pedestal don't really satiate in the way we hope. Anyway, and that provoked in him a desire to understand what was going on. And he had this awakening experience in 1990 where he said this like immense energy of love was pouring out of his chest and then became everything. And he had a lovely description of being the observer, the observed, and the point of view. So all of those aspects, which sounds like what you're talking about there.
Yeah, definitely. And the pouring out love out of the heart, that was like, yeah, I can really relate to that. But yeah, it's very complicated to speak to someone because it sounds an impossibility that you can be located and not located, that you're seemingly looking through body, but energetically you feel intimate and expanded and the size of everything.
Yeah. Well, yes. Now, I've never had an experience like yours, right? But so for me, it's been this sort of gradual exploration. As you would acknowledge, it's not like I ever set out in this way. It just kind of one thing led to another, and it just sort of unfolded. Throw a bit of ayahuasca in there, and various conversations and whatever else. So for me, I've never had, and I'll ask you about your experience. Obviously, like what seemed to be such an intense experience in that way. However, it's very clear to me that awareness is, I'm aware of my thoughts, I'm aware of the bodily sensations, but I'm no more aware of them, or rather the sounds that I experience or the sights I experience, they arise in awareness in exactly the same way as my body. So yes, there's this perceiving, for example, through my eyes, but at the same time, the awareness that I am is also not located anywhere. So it's not as profound an experience as, for example, Federico's had, and obviously you've had. But does that sound like the sort of thing that you're talking to?
I mean, it's really hard when we come to speak about experiences.
Of course. Yeah.
But it sounds like it's getting there, or maybe the same, but like getting there as in there's less separation, and so there's more this intimacy with everything.
Yeah.
But also, I think that everybody comes with a different different energetic load. And for me, I had a lot of suffering prior, so when the shift happened, it was like very dramatic. So if you came in with like less suffering, then maybe the change is like a really gentle fizzling out. Like for some people I meet, they don't notice that point where it's changed, and then maybe at some point they're like, this this is really quite different.
Yeah, it can be like everything changes and yet nothing changes at the same time.
Yeah.
But no, there definitely was some suffering. Right, let's talk about that experience of yours then. So it was over banana fritters, right?
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing the experience? I know you've told it many,
Yeah.
many times, but it's so
Well,
evocative.
the thing that's really beautiful about it is they're coming up to maybe 14 years since it happened to the day. Hang on, just let
Really?
me have a look. When the 17th. So on Thursday, it'll be 14 years.
Oh, well, look, a happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. It's like I'm 14 now years old. Yeah. So yeah, that is a really crazy time. So yeah, being like very young and naive in my 20s, I gave up my whole life. Even though that doesn't really sound like much, when you're in your 20s, it feels a lot bigger than what it is. But then when you get to like 40s, you're like, yeah, this isn't such a big deal. But like I gave up all my life and I went to live with my partner and teacher in India. Ramesh Bolsakar, who I met my partner through, said that I had to listen to everything he said if I wanted to be free. And I was like, far out. And I took it really seriously. And yeah, I was very naive in a sense, but that was the beauty of it. Like, and the internet wasn't so strong then, so it wasn't like I could watch other videos and get other opinions or people that talked badly about non-duality. I was just like, I hooked onto non-duality and yeah, just got fixated. And so I went and lived with my partner for 3 years, or maybe over 3 years in the bush in Australia. And it was like, everything I'd known, everything that I was kind of got taken away. Like it's quite intense to be a foreigner. I don't know if you've ever been a foreigner. I've been a foreigner since I left home at 26 or 7, I think it was, with Roger. And although that was English-speaking country, it's harder in a non-English-speaking country. And, all my friends, we had Skype or something back then, or I don't know, we phoned but it's not the same when you're far away from friends and family. Like speaking over the phone's not the same. So it became this very remote time where we were in the bush. We had 2 dogs, and it was me and him. And he would speak about non-duality and the nature of suffering for hours per day. I feel like I was his starter student. He after that, because of me, then went on and he now teaches. But I was like his first student. And then our neighbors kind of got involved as well. And yeah, it was like really beautiful time, but incredibly hard as well, because I went through this process of like, if you're like really remote and everything's taken away, where does blame go and your uncomfortableness go? When you're in everyday society, you can keep blaming your surroundings. You can say, it's because my mother did this, or my friend did that, or because my job's not this, or this is happening. But when I was like there with Roger, I run out of things to blame. Like I could blame him for my unhappiness to an extent, but it's like limited. So it just really pushed me inwards. Yeah, I could blame the trees, I could blame the aeroplanes, I could blame the birds to an extent, but then there was an inward going. And then on top of that, having Roger like constantly feeding back stuff to me and speaking about non-duality, it was like this cooking pot. We would also go out, so once or twice or 3 times a year, we'd go to India to visit Ramesh, and maybe to go to some other places in India to meet friends. And then once a year I'd come back to England. But the rest of the time I was very much like in this retreat environment. And just, I'd already practiced Buddhism, so I was already used to sitting through uncomfortableness, but just like having nothing to do and sitting through that. And being bored, being uncomfortable, and just really owning that rather than projecting it or trying to satisfy it. And what happened through those 3 years is I kind of went crazy. It kind of like extreme darkness came out of me. And then I also flipped to like latterly, particularly, where I would like look at something and I would fall in love with it. And I didn't know how to talk about that falling in love, because that was like when you were having the experience, you were just in love with it. So you were just like oozing, like a woman came to stay and I didn't really like her, but then I would every so often like fall in love with her, and like every time she spoke, it was like love was dripping off her lips and her body. And I was like, like an hour ago I was not really liking you. And every time I tried to talk to Roger about that, he wasn't very interested. But then I would like flip to immense suffering, like a monster, like a demon coming out of me, like immense suffering, like darkness, like nastiness, like hatred, and all those really like dark stuff. And I would kind of take myself to the bedroom and just lock myself in the bedroom while this happened, a bit like an exorcist. Like loads of energies would go through my body. Um, yeah, and then after over maybe 3 years, Roger woke up one morning and it was quite shocking. And he was like, "It's time for you to leave." And I was like, after 3 years and only being quite young, I was just so used to being there with our dogs and our home. And then it was like, well, what would I do? I wasn't really working. I did massage a bit for the next door. There was a retreat center, but like, what would I do? And also my visa was dependent on Roger as well. So yeah, I was like really, yeah, um, shocked. And then also, I think at one point, I like some part of me did want to break up with Roger, like in a romantic way. We weren't really like romantically in love anymore, but there was also like a lot of attachment to our circumstance, and so I decided to go to Bali for a month just to get over the shock and just to integrate it and process it. Bali is near to where we lived in Australia. And I went there and I knew no one, and there was just a sense like I could die here and nobody would know. I was so alone, like all my friends had begun to vanish. I only really had Roger, And then I had my two neighbours, and I couldn't really speak to my mum about what was happening. In fact, I didn't even tell my parents we'd broken up or that I was in Bali. I didn't want to worry them. So yeah, there was no one to speak about it with. I couldn't really speak to my neighbours because, they were friends with Roger as well, and you can't really do that. So there was just such a aloneness there. But I'd been so well trained by Roger to really embrace that aloneness and to really embrace every feeling that came up. And there was like such a big experience that was happening and nobody to reflect it back. I just really had to go inwards. And I remember like one day I was like laying on the bed and I was looking at the trees, like these palm trees, like blowing in the wind outside. And I just had such a strong sense, like, how can I possibly be alone when they are like stroking me? They are like touching me, like they're not away from me. It's like everything is embracing me. And I think it was like a week or 10 days, I can't remember, that I was there in Bali. And I started having these weird experiences, which I'd been having for years. But when you have weird experiences, you're like, is that indigestion? Or you're like, and then they pass, and then you're like, oh, was that right? So you just kind of don't really speak about them. And I have these weird experiences of everything going really empty. And it was like, I couldn't really think or tell what was happening. Everything was just really empty. And I didn't think of it as a spiritual experience. It just happened and then sort of passed. It might happen for a whole day, like a year before or 2 years before, me and Roger at Alma's ashram, and it happened for like a whole day. Anyway, this started happening more, and also the world started to vibrate or shake. So at night time, like I was on the second floor and I had to go to the bathroom, and there was a very low banister on the balcony, and the whole world was shaking, and I sometimes had to crawl to the bathroom. And again, for some reason, I didn't think this was weird or odd. I was just like, well, that's that. And and then I went to this angel reader, and I had such low self-esteem. I grew up with severe dyslexia and failed so badly at school. I was always told there was something wrong with me. And I went to this angel reader, and it was so beautiful. And they said something like I was going to be enlightened, which I totally didn't think was going to happen for me, even though I'd done all these things. Like I thought that, I thought that, that happened to other people, and I was just now happy with having a bit more peace. And he said that I would become a communicator of it, and I would free people by kissing them on the forehead. And I was like, well, that is surprising. I didn't expect that. And then I just kind of thought, well, that's nonsense. It's just one of these things. And maybe he wanted me to come back and was just saying these things to get me to come back. Yeah. And I was also doing this thing where what Roger taught me was in every given moment, do exactly what you feel like doing. So I was really following that, like not moving until an impulse came up to move me that didn't come from like fear or anxiety or trying to get love, like from seeking. So I was just sometimes sitting for hours in coffee shops or in my bedroom, just not moving. And then the next day, I went to this coffee shop and was having banana fritters and ice cream and a cup of tea for breakfast. And I started to notice that everything was really beautiful. And then I think the thoughts began to get really slow and a lot less. So I wasn't really thinking much, but I remember vaguely thinking, how did I not realize how beautiful this place was and how beautiful the waitress was? And I was just amazed by the beauty of everything. And then it felt like consciousness and that feeling of I am expanded out of me, like quite gently, not like your friend where it just suddenly went poof and exploded. It was like my sense of I am just grew and grew and grew and grew. And then my consciousness that was looking behind my eyes grew and grew and grew. And then it kind of vanished into everything. So my sense of experiencing became like really big until it was in everything. And I was so blissful, and so much love was in that, and so much silence and stillness and emptiness. So as the consciousness came forward, it was like this immense emptiness, like immense vastness. And as the I am came forward, it was like immense love. So those had both been happening independently of each other, but I'd never had them happen together. So I'd had this emptiness feeling, and then I'd had this like falling in love with everyone. But then they kind of happened together, and then they expanded into everything. And I really lost self-awareness of Lisa for a good period of time. Eventually awareness of Lisa came back, which I feel like you need for functioning. Like I couldn't cross the road, and I couldn't tell how people were interacting with me. Like I met this man, and he started smiling and laughing at me, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, he gets it. But I wasn't really thinking. It was just like, I just was like looking at him in the eyes and like laughing and laughing. And we were just standing there laughing and smiling at each other. And I don't think he was a safe person to interact with. Like my body eventually seemed to move away, but I don't think he was laughing at the same thing as me. It was maybe like some wanting to have sex and stuff. And so like it's like, but I had no awareness of that. I was just so, I didn't know I was Lisa or anything for a while. I couldn't cross the road. And that sort of functioning went in and out for years. Like sometimes the self-awareness of Lisa would totally disappear. And that was a bit dangerous, really, because other people could then do anything with you. It's like you don't know that you're Lisa. And I don't mean this is a spiritual experience, but you need some form of self-awareness. Otherwise, you just could become somebody's object. I know that sounds weird, and everything seems like love, so you can't tell the difference between a good or bad person. Like I had some really amazing experiences where I met some really dark characters, and I saw them as absolute divinity. But I needed the self-awareness of Lisa to come back, because maybe that's something that can happen if the whole of society are awakened. But you need some form of self-awareness, otherwise you can imagine like a 30-year-old young me who's already very naive, had a tendency towards low self-esteem, has immense neurodiversity. And then I was just like, anyone could have taken my hand and walked off with me. Like, I was,
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah.
yeah. But it's like, but there's lots of beautiful people out there. Like 99% of people that I met were really beautiful, and I did stay safe. I mean, there were some things that happened that were a little, not so safe, but I did manage, or life managed to navigate this body without it getting eaten by something else.
Wow. So how did you, I mean, actually, God, the questions were bubbling up all through that. And it was
Because
lovely
I
to
think that
listen
you're
to.
neurologically diverse too, right?
Yeah, how can you tell?
I can just tell. My partner is neurologically diverse too, and we're like, dug, 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 there is one.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of the label ADHD because it's got a disorder at the end. But yes, I'm a patron of the ADHD Foundation, and it's been
Okay.
interesting. So yeah, I
And I
can spot.
suspect that you're high intellect as well. So you've also got high intellect with that kind of that creativity.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll take that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I'll come back to the questions, kind of in no particular order. So when you were in this period where that awareness of Lisa was coming and going, and you were on your own, and obviously you had these sort of mad experiences, but how did you look after yourself?
Well, I couldn't. But luckily, life decided that Lisa was to stay alive, so like I would stand at the side of the road and I couldn't work out how you cross a road. Like especially in Bali where the cars are quite intense. They're not quite like India, but they're quite intense. But then somebody would just come and help me cross the road. Like a man, like I remember one particular one. I mean, it's a long time ago now, so I forget. But a man who was like a porter at a hotel, just saw me standing there, and he just came and took my hand and led me across the road. He maybe thought I was a foreigner that was overwhelmed. And then somehow the body would get home and somehow the body would eat, Yeah. And then that kind of went in and out for many years. Now it happens, but normally only if I'm sitting quietly, it doesn't happen when I'm out and about. Like it happens because it's so hard to navigate this society with absolutely no self-reflection.
Yes.
And very little thought.
I could see how that could be tricky. So going back to prior to the banana fritter explosion, and I know obviously like things just happen, right? And I see that in my own life, how one thing led to another in the most random way, and da 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 da. Like it just unfolds. But there is still this sense of, okay, well, I need to. My intuition saying go this way rather than that. A noisy mind might be going, oh, go over here, but then there's a deeper intuition going, no, you got to trust and go over here. So there is still that sense. So prior to the banana fritter, what was your goal, as it were, when you were with Roger for those 3 years?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it was enlightenment. And then Roger speaks about peace of mind. So then after a while, it turned to peace of mind. So just to have a more peaceful mind, I was happy with. I compromised and was like, okay, I'll give up enlightenment. But yeah, at first it was, I wanted to become enlightened. Like I practiced Buddhism and I heard about Buddha's enlightenment. I was like, yes, that is what I want.
Yeah, it certainly can seem that way, can't it? Oh, that would be the ultimate gold medal. And it sounds like at that time, as you said, it wasn't like there was YouTube or all this stuff, but you were aware of enlightenment, but perhaps not to the same degree that one can be now with like you and so many other people talking, and it's non-duality, as per my t-shirt, has just exploded over the last in terms of awareness. It's so bubbling, so close to the surface. Do you think like not having all those, with the cause and effect caveat, not having all of those ways to compare was beneficial?
Yeah, totally. I think if there was now all the media and YouTubes that there is, I would have, I mean, in the way it's all God's will, so it can't be different. But if there was another possibility, I would have learned about abuse, and I would have learned about psychology, and I would have deemed most probably non-duality as sort of not abusive, but yeah, I would have most probably gone down the psychology and abuse route.
What do you mean by that?
I would have seen it as bypassing and abusive, because from a psychology perspective, non-duality doesn't look great. Like if you really study psychology, if you talk about mindfulness or something, then maybe it's okay, but it looks like a bypass. And then also this teacher and narcissism. I would have just not believed the teacher and just sort of thought they're a narcissist and they're fake. I like my character, felt a lot of victimization, and I think it would have gone towards that. I mean, that was a lot of my battle with Roger. Like the stuff that came up was thinking that he was fake or that he was abusive, and that non-duality was abusive. But I had no backup then.
Yeah.
to like validate that. I had no YouTube that I could go on and be like, yes, this is abusive, because it is abusive in a way, in the terms of the ego. Like, you're telling the ego it doesn't exist. I mean, that is like the ultimate awfulness for the ego, and especially when you've had childhood trauma, like to match all that together. And then also the teacher, like this one person sitting at the front of the room giving the answers, like it is in a way a weird thing. But I'm so incredibly grateful that there wasn't that, and I didn't go down that, because it allowed me to really go into that victimhood and that sense of feeling victimized by life or by others, and to really deeply go into myself. There wasn't the distraction, there wasn't the someone validating something. But that's not easy to say, and I always feel this is very hard to talk about with non-duality.
Yeah. I'm really interested by that bypass aspect because, I've spoken to various people who've had very transformative experiences, and the consequence of people who I really feel have been through this, and is that, loving behavior and walking the talk are very much go hand in hand, and a consequence of this. And so when I see some people, paying lip service to that and then not walking the talk, it feels to me that there can be a bit of bypassing going on in non-duality circles. And I saw a video of yours recently where you sort of touched on this. What's your take?
Well, how do we determine what loving behavior is?
Okay, well, I would say that honesty, integrity, things like that. That to me would be loving behavior. Like, if it's all one, then it's treating the other aspects of one
Yeah,
in the same way that we would want to be treated. I mean, it's the whole
yeah,
what's it called? The golden rule, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say honesty. That is one thing that we can sort of in some way recognize what it is. But integrity, I don't know how we can recognize that. So what would integrity be? Like, honesty is quite obvious. It's like not lying.
I
Like,
think
so,
honesty and integrity go quite hand in hand.
but how would you recognize that in another person? Like, honesty, you could catch someone out in a lie, but integrity, how would you recognize that?
I suppose it'd be saying one thing and doing another. So there is that crossover. There's without naming names, that there's someone who talks about this, about the importance of living this, and then hasn't necessarily exhibited that in certain ways. So that to me would be that there's a dissonance there.
Yeah. I think it's really hard to see these things beyond our own projection. Um, so I agree that there is a massive transformation internally that happens, and you could say externally, because the world is you. But how we see that in another without looking through our own projections is very hard. Honesty, you could kind of catch someone in a lie. But I mean, I generally don't lie, but I didn't lie generally before. So sometimes neurologically diverse people are like that. And so sometimes what it is it's like painfully awkward with me, because I have to be really accurate. But lying is also a funny thing, because the way in which we phrase things, like lying can be by not saying things as well. So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's an interesting thing. But so generally I don't, but I do lie sometimes. Like recently I had to lie because these family dynamics are too complicated, and if I had been honest, they just wouldn't have been able to understand it. But generally I don't lie, and if there is somebody that is also like that, then it can be really deep, where we're really like saying everything. Like with my partner, maybe you feel that, like where I'm really saying everything.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah, yeah.
sometimes with some people, so even like when I do my talks, like I can't really talk about my past. and I'm not a good girl, like I'm the type of character, in class, I wasn't the good girl. I was the type of character where I had to examine things and I had to go and explore these things. So I'm not, and I think sometimes people get an impression of me that I'm a good girl. I'm not, because I look very sweet and I've got lots of loving energy. I'm not, and I'm not. I don't necessarily believe in society's laws, like yeah, but I can't really talk about this explicitly online for legal reasons, and then also because every story that you tell, you're you're talking about other people, so you've got to be careful about talking about other people online as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think all these things are really difficult, to you can see it sometimes. I think the best thing to do is to everyone to be educated in what narcissism is,
Yes.
and everyone to be educated in the signs to look for, and people taking accountability,
Yes.
and then kind of like trying to turn everything inwards in a way. I think these things are really hard to see.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I would have many people that over the 14 years that are speaking that would report bad stories of me, because it's the nature. I would also have many people that report good stories, but it's the nature of life. I'm going to upset people, and then they're going to have projections on me.
Mm. Mm.
And especially if you're confronting somebody's ego. Like, say, if you confront somebody, like, say, if they've shown a bit of dishonesty and you confront it, that might be insanely shameful for them. So the only way they can deal with that is to make up a story about how, say, you've done this to them, or you're being abusive, or you're taking um, the power, or your whatever story. When people get shame activated, they often then the only way they can deal with it is by making up a story of the other person, and then that spreads like wildfire. People love gossip, and they love, like, oh yeah, and especially gossip about a woman. Like, we love to bring down women in this society. We love to bring down men, but like women, I feel like we love to bring down more. So I think these things are very complex, and it can really distract from turning inwards.
Mm. Yeah.
And also, nobody's perfect. Like, I'm also imperfect, so I'm going to
Of
make
course.
mistakes and hurt people, and some people will be able to hold that, and some people will then, create big stories about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like it's a really hard thing to determine,
Yeah.
and it can distract from going inwards. And I feel like the safest bet is to just really learn what narcissism is, because
Yeah.
if the person's not narcissist, the teacher's not narcissist, and they have high amount of empathy, then they're going to self-reflect at some point,
Yes.
and they're going to expand those issues.
Mm. That's a
That
really
would be
lovely answer.
my,
Yeah. See, yeah, in fact, even as you were speaking, I think that integrity, you've helped me clarify a bit about that. I think intention's really important. And so, like, yeah, narcissism, there's not
yeah,
that self-reflection, that kind of ability to explain away anything.
yeah,
And the story comes up,
yeah,
and, perhaps
yeah,
there's a skill in being able to weave around that. But I think, yeah, taking responsibility and self-reflection, because we're all going to mess up, right?
yeah,
Absolutely. Right.
yeah,
But I think a willingness to open to that.
yeah,
Something else you said earlier, was, in your years in the bush, uh, that real openness to being with anything, like boredom or, rageful emotions, through to the love, when you fell in love with that woman and then an hour later couldn't stand her. um, that being open to, our internal and external experience, um, how fundamental, well, I know the answer, but that's so fundamental, isn't it? And yet in these days, it's so easy to not be with our experience in that way. So that must have been, really fertilized the ground in a way for what came. Again, with that cause and effect caveat.
What was the question again? I got confused.
I've
in
no
that.
idea. No, so in those 3 years in the bush,
Yeah,
you spoke about really being with what came up,
yeah,
right? Without distraction.
yeah.
And so the importance of
Oh, yeah.
that
That,
kind
yeah,
of way of being.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can. It doesn't. You don't have to be in the bush to do that, or to be in retreat to do that. But this is what I was just talking about with the teacher thing and with the abuse thing. Is the most important thing is going in, and everything becoming an investigation. The problem is when you do that, is you do open yourself up for other people taking advantage of you, because if you're going in and the other person isn't going in, then there's a disbalance in the relationship. So that's why I say learn about narcissism, but you want to take everything inwards. So every projection that you have onto anyone, even if you have a horrific argument and they're really awful, and you decide they're a narcissist or whatever, don't go too much into the stories. Notice your mind going into the stories, but turn it in. And what is happening here? Like, what is my mind believing? What are my seeking energies believing? What do I want to be? If I can't bear the way the other person has treated me and I hate them or something, like, what is the source of that? What is the root of that? So in the end, it's like absolute discernment, like not this, not that. That isn't who I am. When these stories are strong, it's like the attention gets stuck in them. And then we believe that's who we are, but it's not even a conscious thing. It just becomes who we are. So in everything, every interaction, like everything is the possibility to recognize self, as long as you don't believe the stories.
Mm.
The stories are what tricks us. The stories are
Mm.
lies, but the whole world is a story. So it's so intimate. Like just like opening the door is a possibility, because the door is an illusion, let alone like all the projections that you have onto other people or ideas you have onto other people. Everything is illusion. The thing is this makes you very vulnerable. So this is why you need to maybe learn about healthy relationships, so not to other people convince you that it's always your fault and you're always doing something wrong. If you're taking everything inward and other people aren't, then you have to really recognize that. Like, so you don't want to get into too big a discussions about who's right or who's wrong, or you just
Mm.
say, okay, yeah, that's what they're doing.
Mm.
And everything is an opportunity to realize this, like not this, not that. So the story you've got, so say if you're, I don't know, caregiving, I'm caregiving at the moment, and you project any stories onto that, they're not true. It doesn't
Mm.
mean that you carry on being that situation for the rest of your life, but any story is not true, of liking it, of not liking it. Peace, freedom is always in every moment, no matter what you do, whether you're in prison, whether you're dying, whether you're in pain, in love. It's always your essence. And this is the freedom to see that everything is illusory, and that life, this is going to sound really hardcore to some people, life never works out. It's never going to give you what you think you need. The only place is here, is your heart of being. In the end, you're going to have to watch everybody die, unless you die first, but you're going to have to go through that process of dying, which is painful. You're going to have to give away all your possessions, unless it's like a quick, sudden death. But in that, you have to give away all your possessions, all your relationships, all your stories, your looks, your body, everything. Everything, this world, this creation. Nothing's going to work out. It doesn't mean that means that life is hopeless and not something to love. It's just that these stories that you're always projecting onto time, that this will give me what I want, this will free me, that, oh, if I didn't have to do this job, if I didn't have to do that, is not true. It's illusion. Your freedom is in every second.
Mm. I interviewed or spoke to Chris Niebuhr recently, who wrote a brilliant book, No Self, No Problem, which is about putting it in terms of left brain, right brain, which I think can be helpful because
Yeah, I've had people talk to me about this. Yeah,
because because obviously I think the majority of people really think in terms of, well, I am my brain, and certainly that's where I come from. So I think it first of all, it's quite a good way to meet people. But brilliant story about split brain patients, and I'll try and tell it really briefly. But so obviously, the left hemisphere is the language center, and it controls the right side of the body. So you're looking at the right eye. The right brain, intuition, awareness, big picture, etc., and it looks out the left part of the body. And these researchers cut the bit that binds the two, the corpus callosum, with these people who had epilepsy, to see if they could relieve their symptoms, and they did relieve their symptoms, but it had this interesting side effect which shows how the two hemispheres work. And they had this experiment where they would hold up instructions written down so that only the right brain, so the awareness, the intuitive side, could see. And they'd hold up an instruction, say, for example, going, walk or laugh. Laugh's quite a good one. So they held up laugh, and the person would start laughing. And then the researchers would ask them, why are you laughing? Now, the left brain, which is the language center, is the one that would answer the question. Now, the left brain hadn't seen the instruction to laugh. So the obvious answer would be, I don't know why I'm laughing. But immediately, the left brain would concoct a story saying, I'm laughing because I can't believe you guys do this for a job. What a way to make a living. Or with the walk, I needed to get up and get a drink. I'm thirsty. And so I think this is so revealing that, the thinking mind just is permanently creating stories. And so seeing through that, as you said, the stories that we concoct in any minute, whether it be a story of, oh, I feel a certain way because of something you've done, through to something like, well, I am British, or whatever it might be. Like, stories are, seeing through the stories, I think, is so valuable, but can be quite disconcerting. And they've got quite a gravitational pull, right? People can say, oh yeah, I get that, and then are straight back in that thinking mind side of things.
Yeah.
Anyway, that just came to
Okay,
mind when
yeah.
you were talking
No,
about
that's exactly what sent me insane at Roger's house. Was really, so Ramesh and Roger, they always put the reason for everything is God's will. And that was often Roger's reply to me was, it's God's will. And this sent my mind bonkers, because my mind wanted to have a story or to have a conclusion about something. And then to not have a conclusion, to just give it to God, I was like it was, insane making. But I mean, in the end, like you say, that is what you've got to go beyond, is this story making. Like we've got this amazing ability to make stories which give us complex functioning, but we get lost in it. And we think it's our reality.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a world of fiction, don't we?
Yeah,
Of
fiction.
countries and us and them and
Yeah,
money, and I mean, it's all a fiction. It's that old thing
yeah,
of it, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. And I was, when you were talking about the stories we project onto each other and in relationship and stuff, my parents, for example, they've had the same argument for my whole life, and on the surface it can look different, but what I realize is it's these deeper wounds or
yeah,
deeper feelings that will come up
yeah.
that haven't been like addressed, and then the mind latches onto that feeling and tries to make a sense of it in the moment, right? Points and goes,
Totally.
oh, it's
Yeah,
this that you've just done there
yeah,
with the kettle or whatever it might be. It's
yeah,
not, it's that deeper thing. And I
yeah,
see this in my own relationship, because I was like, I determined, I didn't want to have a similar thing, and it's still an ongoing thing. So just a quick example, we had someone come around recently, to give us a quote for something in the house, and Alex and I slightly had a different viewpoint, and had a bit of a bicker. And then afterwards, this guy went and we carried the bicker on. And then I went away and then came back in, and the clear answer was, look, both of us are semi-right, but both of us are completely wrong. Like, we've both just got a story about this, and
yeah,
we have a choice to just drop the story. And in dropping the story, then it's just gone. It's like, there's nothing there.
yeah,
It
totally.
was just a happening, right? And then
Yeah,
a story making about just something that had happened.
yeah.
But yes, I just
And
think that whole,
the difficulty of it is that, like in that situation, is there is nothing there, but because there's a triggering, there is this uncomfortableness in the body, and then the mind is trying to calm that by creating a story, but it's making it worse. The
Yes.
triggering and the uncomfortableness.
But that's and that's why like you talk a lot about like body stuff, right? Embodying it. And before we started speaking, you were explaining why you sit cross-legged, and I want to come back to that because I thought that was fascinating in terms of energies and feeling it. But that the feelings in the body, like that aspect, it seems to me can quite often be overlooked when people talk about non-duality. It can stay quite heady and conceptual, as opposed to really feeling into what's going on in the body, which is something you emphasize.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, if you can, I mean, what happens in non-duality from my perspective is that as there becomes less self or less selfing, the personal awareness is naturally resting in this moment more. So as you're, like before, when you're totally identified, the self-awareness, personal consciousness, is constantly watching the thoughts and the stories of you. And as it becomes less attached to those stories, the personal consciousness or awareness, whatever you call it, is resting more in the moment. And then as you rest more in the moment, then you have to deal with the discomfort that is in the body, which is built up from many years of false storytelling, of telling ourselves things that aren't true. So, and this is why, again, like, how do we tell what's projection and not? In social situations, in a way, everything is projection. Like, everything is a story. But what you want to come back to is when it's triggering you and when it isn't, and learn that feeling of what seeking is and what triggering is. And then when it's triggering and the seeking energy, you can investigate it. And then other times it's a discernment of this isn't true for me and that isn't true for me. But it's very much in the body. You discover it through the body, not through thinking. At first, non-duality might be conceptual, and then as the attention is resting more and more here, then you're using what's happening in the body to navigate what's happening. It's a complex process, and it's also a really simple process. It's just basically coming back to what's actually happening. And when you're right here, you'll notice these things. So when you're in the disagreement with your partner, you could notice that there's discomfort in the body. And through noticing that, you knew that most probably you were getting triggered into an old story that's in the body.
Yeah. And yeah, like, so tuning into that, what's going on in the body, and like when you get triggered, for example, that's actually a blessing, or that's an opportunity to turn towards that and for example, uncover, as you very beautifully just said, around, okay, what is the lie you told yourself at some point in the past to make sense of what was going on?
Yeah.
And then it's a way to release that. And to me, that's the most beautiful opportunity of relationship. It is the triggering.
Yeah, totally. And relationships are such amazing reflections of this, because what we also have a tendency to do is to label what the other person is. So to name what the other person is, to then find our security in that relationship. But as soon as you're naming and labeling the other person as something, you're actually just projecting your own stuff onto them. Actually, what the person is, and this is what to me true love is no thing in every moment, which means that they're all possibilities. And to see somebody as all possibilities rather than this story that we hold of them is like total love and forgiveness. Like, it's really beautiful thing to allow your partner, after like 20 years of being with them, to be that person that you met the first day, to be anything, to be all the possibilities. It's and I don't mean that as in you're forgetting their story. I mean it as that you're so immediate that you're so present that you're not confining them to what you think you know. The thinking can come up when it needs to come up in the relationship of, oh yeah, you like this. But there's this other element of allowing them to just be the space in order for creativity to come through. And that takes such depth to be able to be conscious of what you need them to be, what you want them to be, of holding them to a story, holding them to past things that they've done, or fears or insecurity. If I'm not like this, they won't like that, and this will happen. It's such an amazing teaching lesson. And I have to say, like, I still am constantly learning and expanding with my partner. There's these sorts of things, and it's so beautiful
Yeah.
to do that with somebody.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. My sense is that it's quite rare for people to very rare to sort of take responsibility for our own stuff.
Yeah, very
Like, I
rare.
know when Alex and I first got together, and there was, we would trigger each other because of our energetic match up. But then we learned in time and got more and more skillful about, okay, no, this is my stuff and that's your stuff. And, we're responsible, for what's coming up. And that's so rare.
Yeah,
that it's that old saying of, when you're pointing a finger at someone else, there's three fingers pointing back at you.
yeah,
But as you do it, like, it does become easier, and it becomes like, it does deepen, like you just described. It's this
yeah,
continual deepening, right?
yeah,
But it's so rare, isn't it?
yeah, so rare. And you like, for yeah, for me, it took me a while to work out that in meeting a partner, like, one of the most important things for me is for them to have empathy, and them to have an ability to look at themselves, to not, it doesn't mean that they can't get reactive or act badly at points, but eventually, maybe a day or two or a week later, to go back to that and to explore it and to
Mm,
have that commitment to it. And
mm,
yeah, I didn't realize the importance of this, in relationship, because we're kind of like, you've kind of like create like third entity. And what me and my partner feel, because we're both empaths as well, so we have this element, like you say, but we also, so say if I walk in the room and they're angry, or just if they're in a different country actually and they're angry, there's an element that can feel that too. So it's also like really trusting each other, because that, when you begin to get to that level of intimacy, you can easily manipulate the other person. Both of us so don't want to manipulate the other person,
mm.
so we're so careful with that, like, that empathy of each other, that ability to feel deeply the other person's emotions and not use it in any way to get what we want. Or if we do use it to get what we want, we then recognize that and, bring it back to the table and admit that,
See, that's integrity to me.
yeah. But that's a very hard thing to see. So my partner would, I think, name me as honesty and integrity, and have those things. But for other people to see that takes a lot of getting to know.
Yeah,
It's a very hard thing to see in other people.
yeah, yeah.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of like intimacy to build that
Mm,
up and to really learn each other and to get
yeah,
past your own projections.
yeah. And like, bravery, I think, at first, like, like, again, when Alex and I got together, it was like, we have to be committed to this way of being, this
Yeah,
path together, or fundamentally it's not going to work.
yeah,
Like, and I want it to work, and we want it to work together. And very fortunate that she was sort of open to that and very up for it.
yeah,
And as a result, it's become so much easier to do that and pass out
yeah,
things, just a bit like the argument, or the bicker, because we still like the odd bicker. Um, the bicker that we had, it just passes so much quicker. Whereas,
yeah,
in the early days, it could take days.
yeah,
And I really see that. And then, but as then I feel like if you embrace this way of being, this is my stuff, it's coming up, I'll take responsibility, I'll speak to it, but I'm not going to demand that
Yeah.
you change or you be different.
Yeah.
This is my stuff, right?
Yeah.
That then, like, if you can be in relationship with someone like that, like the personal, quote unquote, and collective growth, it can be so
Yeah.
rapid. Like, and so with
Totally.
my wife, it's no coincidence, I don't think, that like her energetic gifts. So she's very gifted energetically, in the same way it sounds like you are, and because you mentioned earlier about that sound, the vibrating sound or the vibration. Oh,
Yeah.
the world's vibrating. So she used to vibrate in bed and whack me, thinking I was shaking the bed, until she learned to lean into it. At which point, boom, she expanded into everything, and now she does that all the time. And like her Reiki, powers. um, I think those skills that were obviously already there have really blossomed and grown. I think in the safety of this, looking at our relationship in this way of, oh, okay, this is a chance for us to see what comes up, take responsibility for it, and allow it to unwind and understand and let go some of the lies that we laid down unconsciously, when we were growing up, of, oh, I'm not worthy enough, or this person doesn't love me because they're not loving in the way that I want them to be, they're not expressing in the way I want them to be. So it's a really beautiful thing in that way, but it's not how most people think of
Yeah.
relationships, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think if you're prepared to like commit to that rather than just looking for pleasure, so you could easily jump from one relationship to
Mm,
another, then there can be such depth that is
mm,
created and such inward investigation. Like I love it when something comes up between us because it's like another opportunity to expand beyond that.
mm,
Like it's such a deep practice, intimacy, and to get to know someone really, really
mm.
well.
Yeah. Is your would your partner ever like want to join you in terms of talking together, or doing working with people together?
No, I don't think so.
It's not his bag.
No, no. I, don't- I mean, he's going to see this, and there's always the possibility because life is like every possibility, and maybe, um, but he's neurologically diverse. He's autistic, and he tends to not go online.
Right.
Sometimes autistic people don't like to really go online or be visible. I think there's one photo from his whole entire life of him online.
Wow. That's
So
off.
yeah, so I think it's unlikely, but who knows? Life is always very surprising.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting. Which makes me think as well. Like, I'm so grateful to be speaking to you, and I've been conscious of what's going on in my body as we've been speaking, and there's definitely this like warmth and like that loving energy you give off. Like, I can feel it, and obviously, there's a dearth of blokes and single blokes, no judgment, talking about this kind of stuff. um and there aren't as many women necessarily. I mean, obviously there are, but there aren't as many women in positions of visibility,
Yeah,
and I think
especially
that's a shame.
especially around non-duality.
Yeah.
So so maybe there is more in other areas of spirituality, and it's very fascinating as to why that happens. I think that there's the natural energy in the female body to not push themselves forward. And I think that's a very natural energy. I think there's also a conditioned energy from society that is that there's like old conditioning which holds women back from not putting themselves forward. But I also think it's a natural way of of more feminine energy to not push forward. So there's that. Then you've got the issue of the audience. So if we take YouTube now, you you have the issue of the audience. So in spirituality, there tends to be more women. And in non-duality, I think there still tends to be more women, but there's a lot more men than. So overall in spirituality, it's a lot more women, I think, that come to it. And then non-duality attracts more men. So it's really interesting as to why on YouTube or on social media, men end up more popular as teachers. I think that there's less female teachers. I think that women won't push themselves forward as much. Also, there might be that women are raising kids, although it's very different in societies now. There's still still an element to it as well. And then also there is the audience, and I feel that there is a discrimination in the audience. And I feel like part of it, and I've said this before, and I'm sure you get shot for it in the future when we discover more PC ideas, that it's also partly women that are responsible for it. I think that women sometimes struggle on the whole to go to female teachers.
Interesting.
So that's going to sound, like there is women that will do that, but I think that there is that in play. And then I think as a whole, that listening to advice or information from women is also as a whole difficult for society as well. So if I was to do something more like Reiki or more like healing, that would be okay. But wisdom is harder, I think, for society as a whole to accept from a woman.
Yeah.
Because we're just not used to that. We're just not used to women presenting in that way. And so it doesn't fit into our ideas. So I think there's two elements of play, is that more men can accept a woman teacher in certain ways because they don't see it as competition. There's elements to it. Some men can reject it as well. The biggest audience is women, and women, I think, find it a struggle because of competition, because of shame, of feeling inferior, because of self-hatred of women that they're not aware of. So then they can only project that respect or love onto men. That's a hard thing to say, women. I'm sorry for saying that, but I think it's like a prejudice that women have against women. It's and that's a debatable thing. But I've just done this for so many years now, and I've watched, and I've had YouTube analytics, and I've watched how these things have gone. And I watch other female teachers, so I consciously mark and register other female teachers teaching. And I also interview female teachers as well. And I was also part of a non-duality female groups. Yeah. And have a lot of non-duality female teacher friends. So there's a whole host of things. So if we want to change it, in the end, there's no free will and it's all a dance of God. But we have this apparent free will. And if we want to change it, you have to register. So am I going on retreat? And am I going on retreats to men and female teachers? Or am I just going on retreats to male teachers? Is that because I trust male teachers more? What is it that I trust in them more? What is happening in my body? And it's not, I'm saying go to all female teachers, but just look at it. Look at your own dynamics around that. If when I listen to a female teacher, do I instantly hate them? What is it that comes up? Is it jealousy, insecurity, fear, feeling that they don't know, or that they're stupid, or that they're not intelligent enough? Like, what is it so explore it for yourself. And particularly, I would say for women, I think, like with men, there can be a lot of hatred and discrimination for women that express non-duality. And that can be more obvious because the violence of it comes out a lot more quicker, the anger and the violence. Like they'll write really awful messages. But I think that if women just explored this in themselves, because the largest audience of spirituality is women, then there would be a huge shift in it. And I think women are willing and want to do that because women notice this and they want to change it.
I wonder too if the sort of masculine view of non-duality, it can almost be a bit bit empty, bit conceptual, bit heady, whereas the feminine side is more full and loving, so to speak. So, you know, the Nisargadatta quote you've obviously got on your website
Yeah.
of nothing, you know, wisdom tells me I'm nothing, love tells me I'm everything, and between the
Yeah.
two my life flows. And yeah, maybe it's easier, I think, to keep it in that
Yeah.
conceptual, abstract way.
Yeah.
And so that's why I enjoy it with my wife. Like we want to do more stuff together because we bring something different. You know, it's the yin and
Yeah.
the yang of she has this energetic healing,
Yeah.
nurturing. Obviously, you know, she's mother and uh, energy to her that I don't. But I have perhaps a bit more of a
Yeah.
slightly philosophical or certainly verbose,
Yeah.
um, you know, approach. And so bringing it together,
Yeah.
I think that could be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that that's really beautiful. Like if you have that together, like a female, and a feminine and masculine approach, because also on like what people are often looking for is like new ideas, something to stimulate storytelling, and so that's another reason why a feminine energy can be less interesting. So if you match it with somebody that is more into storytelling and explaining, and then you have this energetic feminine energy alongside, it's like a really beautiful dance.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah,
Um, can I ask you a little bit about uh, nuts and bolts? So, you know, in terms of like practice, so I know you were a you spent a lot of time with Tony Parsons, who
yeah,
obviously says, you know, any form of practice is just emphasizing the illusory nature of self. But then
yeah,
you've obviously got someone like Ramana Maharshi, who very much emphasized, no, you know, you need self inquiry to by the ego to burn up the ego. And I
yeah,
remember, do you know Gary Weber? I think you do. I think you've been on a panel with Gary.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and he said that he was at something with Tony and said, yeah, but Tony, you'd done all this, you know, practice before, and even if, as you say, it's just an unfolding, that sense of feeling a draw um, to meditation, to self inquiry, and all that stuff, like that's part of that, and that can be part of that.
yeah.
So yeah, I just wonder what your take is on like meditation or self inquiry, and if you do that with people, if you do that with yourself, if you yeah, because you obviously did a lot of that before the banana fritter explosion.
Yeah. So I talk about it in two different levels. So I feel like when you come into this subject, normally the body mind mechanism is messed up in the sense that it's spent many years telling itself something that isn't true, and it's over aroused the nervous system, the hormones are out of balance, the eating is out of balance, it doesn't know how to relax, it's constantly looking for new fixes. So the body is like completely out of balance often when it comes to this, and some people are worse and some people are less. I feel like that's going to get more intense in our society because we've got a lot more toxins and a lot more stimulants from the internet. So when the body's really uncomfortable, um, meditation or hearing about the stillness of what we are right now, or to inquire who is looking, um, is very hard. So I feel like the body has to go through a process of settling down. This isn't always the case. You have some people that deeply suffer and then spontaneously wake up.
Mm.
But for most people, for me included, the body mind mechanism had to settle down. Um, and then when the body mind mechanism settles down, you can begin to listen to non duality teachers from a different place. And I feel somebody like Tony, what he's doing is he's doing, he must really dislike me saying this, but he's doing like a meditation. I feel like that's what I do as well. And in order to do that, you have to have like really live speaking. You can't talk too much about past and future and doership and you and what you've got to do in time. It's more of this spontaneous words that are appearing. And when you begin to hear that, then it's like another possibility begins to present itself and something else begins to happen. But generally, before you can begin to listen to the teacher from that perspective, there generally has to be a lot of settling down. So before I met Tony Parsons, I'd been practicing Buddhist for 5 years. So I'd done many retreats and lots of meditation. And then I met Tony. And then a couple of years after that, I met Roger and went on this next massive 3-year retreat. Yeah. So I kind of feel like it's two different aspects, because in the end, who would work on themselves? And I feel like that Tony it's the nature of life. It's like he's misunderstood a lot of the time,
Right.
and he's used as like a practical guide for life. Whereas I feel like what he's doing is he's like a bird song calling like this, this, this. And if you can hear that beyond his personality and beyond your idea of doership, there can be this immense resonance that happens with him, which is really divine. And so
Yeah.
when I first met Tony, I just fell in love with him, not romantically or sexually, but he just, when he was like speaking, I just knew what he was speaking about from a really deep energetical level. But prior to that, I'd done 5 years of meditating, of learning how to be by myself, of learning about projections, ideas, body work, qigong, therapy. And then when I heard him, it was like in the Buddhist center, I felt like their teachings were a bit dead. Like it wasn't like everybody was teaching from books and from knowledge, whereas his felt like really immediate and alive and present. And it was just felt like this, free meditation. And he used to be like, all there is this. I don't know if he still does this. All this is this. And it was just like this immense energy would like rise, like and presence. And I feel like I'm a teacher like that too.
Yeah.
And I try to speak about it to try and convince people to do all the stuff behind the scenes. Yeah. But if I
Yeah.
speak about that too much, it's like it loses the energy.
Yeah.
Like the energy just wants to speak about presence, about what's right here, and that you are an illusion.
Yeah. Right. I just want to that you are an illusion. Just quickly on that, because I think this can get misunderstood a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So could you just clarify that a bit? Because obviously, as we said, there is that point of view of life experiencing itself through Lisa's eyes and through Simon's eyes right now. There is seemingly
Yeah.
a body here, right?
Yeah.
And we are embodied in that way. So can you just clarify that? Because I saw someone say that, and someone else replied, I am real, my dog's real, my cat's real,
Yeah.
etc., etc. So it's nuanced.
Yeah. So what we forget is we forget our infinite still nature of ourself. And that if the personal consciousness is resting in the big consciousness right here, or resting in beingness, the whole world, everything you think, everything you know disappears. Even location, body, everything. There is simply presence, an unnameable presence. And this element is what is forgotten, what is hidden. So, and that's our truth. That is what you go back to after you die. Even though you've always been it your whole life, your truth is this stillness which always is. But in order to function in this world, which is also illusory, because it's like the world, the thoughts, the you is illusory. But in order to function in it, there has to be an apparent you that's in relation with an apparent world. But that's never your truth. When you die, you go back to what you were, which is the stillness of what you are. That is the source of all being. But in order to keep speaking about it, you have to keep telling what you're not. So it doesn't mean there is an appearance of this being real, there is an appearance of a character, but we have to keep going beyond that. Like, what is beyond that to point to that which is here right now?
Lovely. Right, just to go back, I had a question before you go. Just to go back to Tony and for example Gary Weber. So Gary, said that he spent 30 or 1,000 hours doing various things, and then self-inquiry was his secret sauce.
Yeah.
And with yoga and like the body work was so important.
Yeah.
And he came out of a yoga pose and just complete stillness, and he's been in this non-dual state, and he's been through MRIs and all the, I think whatever it is, the gamma waves, like he is in that blissful state. It's been shown in that way, and he looks back now and says, well, even though there was this compulsion to do self-inquiry and this quest to get his thinking mind to stop jumping around like a monkey, in hindsight, once he got there, he realized there was no doer, but at the time it felt like there was one.
There's a do. Yeah.
And that's the paradox, I suppose.
Yeah.
That was what was striking me when you said that about Tony. Tony's just pointing to the truth of it, but that can be a little misconstrued.
Yeah, totally. And that's like really sad about non-duality, is it's really misunderstood. And I feel like when there is this sense of doership, it's better to seek spiritually than it is to be like, oh, fuck it, like I'm not going to do anything. Because if you have that mentality, what will unconsciously happen is your seeking patterns will go back to what they used to be, which will more than likely be super unhealthy. So it's like such a, it's just like everything. It's nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. Like if you speak too much about time and doership and doing, you lose that vibrancy and that energy of that immediate communication. But if you don't do that, then people can get lost in like bypassing and negating themselves and not actually like investigating and going inwards. And like for me, it was not true, which you could call is a very strong meditation. It's neti. And then I also used to rest the attention in the I am. So it's very much in line with Nisargadatta, considering there was Roger and Ramesh, and then Nisargadatta, who was Ramesh's teacher.
That resting in the I am, I think, is interesting because, again, it's like finding what resonates with your body mind, right? So when as someone who is a bit neurodiverse, as you pointed out, and can be a bit heady, resting in the I am, it can sometimes then feel a bit heady. So for me, I find a more useful thing is to rest in as wide as possible.
Yeah.
In all
Spaciousness.
directions.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And then, for example, I notice sort of paradoxically when I do that, actually, I feel more in touch with the sensations in my body and the intuition and the signals in my body, even though I'm not going towards them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, did you think those are the same practices?
Just different focus. But same. But basically, they're resting the attention in the attention. They're resting in what's actually here, which is consciousness. Like we are perceiving this, and there is this sense of beingness. They're both right here. So it's resting in what's actually happening, which isn't separate from life, rather than the attention, the personal awareness going into the stories and into the dreamland. There's nothing wrong with the dreamland, but the problem is it becomes an addiction to it, and it becomes all there is.
Yeah. And then in terms of body work, and you did mention bypassing a minute ago, because I hear a lot of people say, well, that slightly Tony Parsons view, like any practice is pointless. And maybe I'll look at it slightly differently now. Now you've mentioned that, Tony Birdsong. And I'm not talking about Tony here. I'm talking about other people.
Yeah.
But for example, for me, like the body stuff is so important.
Yeah.
Because without that, my locus of attention can feel quite up here.
Yeah.
So, I spend a lot of time, doing body scans, like setting myself reminders to come into the body work, yoga. Did some Tai Chi, Qigong, and so like really the body work seems so important.
Yeah, I would agree. Not important to become free, but important for the person to really settle down. Like and when the person really settles down, then that freedom can present itself. But yeah, really, really important. And if you look at the yogic practices, or if you look into like China and Qigong, there's always this body work that comes along with it, and health, and what you eat. And it's just not like the stories you tell yourself is totally connected to what you eat and totally connected to the energies happening in your body, like the movements of energy and even physical pain that's happening in your body. So for me, what happened after the awakening and even prior was that I began to associate everything with chakras. And so I look at the body as like a chakra system, and the chakras are also in all your body, and they're actually in the whole of life as well. But generally, if you feel sad, it's maybe going to be in the heart area. If you feel fear, it's most probably going to be in the sacral, but it can be everywhere because chakras go all over your body. And through moving the body and changing the position of the body, through massage of the body, from putting your focus on different places in the body, then you can totally change the energy in the body, which then changes the thinking. So you can use the thoughts to change the body, but you can use the body to change the thoughts. They're not separate. That they're the same thing. I mean, even the thoughts, like they don't even know if thoughts are in the brain. Like you've heard about the transplants of a heart, and then somebody starts having the thoughts of, it's such an interesting thing. So I think it's so super important, these things. And I continuously do body work, eating well, exercise. That's, I love, doing, I don't really like doing fast yoga, but I like slow yin yoga.
Yeah.
But all these things, TRE is a new thing that's come up, which I think is amazing.
I spent a bit of time with David.
Yeah.
But I really love the way you put it there. It's not body work to get somewhere. It's body work to settle things down, to perhaps give an opportunity for it to come through you if that's what's meant to happen, as it were.
Yeah. And most of the time that is what's meant to happen. But most of the time that's the process, is that the person settles down and then this freedom presents itself. So the person seeks less, and then that subtlety, that which has seemingly been hidden, becomes so obvious, but not for that person that you think is going to get there.
Yeah. So for me, a next obvious question would then be, so what are the biggest barriers, as it were, that we put in place? Is it, distraction, numbing, getting stuck in the head, obviously digital devices now, monging out in front of the TV. Is it those what would you say?
Yeah, those three things. I mean, to me, it's seeking. So the identity, as soon as there's identity with that timeline, then there is seeking to keep pleasure and avoid pain. And so that manifests mostly in distraction. And we distract by blaming others for our problem. We distract by blaming ourselves for a problem. We distract by YouTube, by the phone, arguing. Arguing is a really interesting thing, because when you're in seeking and you're suffering, if you argue with someone, it actually can release the energy. So getting into argument and conflict with people, it can kind of release and validate that energy. So there's so many different ways we do it, but in the end it's distracting. We're not prepared to sit with the discomfort that is arising. So you finish work and there's a discomfort and you just want pleasure. So you try to do it by drinking alcohol or switching on the TV or going on your device, rather than you've maybe pushed yourself too hard that day. You've maybe been too mental or something, and there is immense discomfort. There is what you could call karma coming back for that. So you've had a stressful day, and rather than allowing that stress to process through the body, you try your best to manipulate yourself into some form of pleasure hit. Masturbation, anything, like flirting online to try and give you like, boom, something. Whereas actually, if you did the opposite and you just let everything settle, there's such bliss sitting there as yourself, as beingness.
Allowing things to be there, allowing things to be as they are, and
Yeah,
and embracing stillness.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. However, if there is trauma coming up, then it's better you go to a trauma therapist. It's not always good to sit through trauma.
Yeah.
So it's, basically allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, unless it's trauma, and then you need to do trauma work, so you can just get stuck in trauma and be sat there in terror or fear or paranoia for hours.
Hmm. And shadow work,
Yeah.
like for example, I know I watch you and Angelo talking. He talks about this a lot. Angelo DeLulo, about you might have an awakening experience or see this clearly, but then there's still that momentum of those um, misperceptions that we laid down before
Yeah.
that are playing out, and so
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work to do often.
Yeah. Yeah. And the shadow work will come up the less the attention is focused in the storyline, and it comes back more here, the shadow work will come up. Like, so all your unconscious thoughts and beliefs will come up. And this is where you often need a teacher or a guide to help you navigate that, because the projection ability is so strong. This is what I was talking about earlier, is like that urge to project it onto the outside world or onto yourself and to get stuck in that. So with that shadow work, often I recommend like doing one-to-one sessions with people. Working with people to explore that shadow and those illusions that come up. That's very hard to do by yourself. You normally need someone to help teach you how to do it before you can really sit and stay and examine and dissect these lies that come up. Otherwise, the mind can convince itself that there is actually a problem.
I have had quite a lot of emotional or rather physical reactivity in my body.
Mm.
And I've sometimes tried to white knuckle it through that, and
Mm.
my body's kind of got stuck in this activation state, often for days at a time.
Mm.
And actually, one thing that I have found, well, two things I found help. One is actually around breathing, is
Mm.
getting that breathing into a non into more of a settled way. And then the other is that expanding out, because what I found was, if something came up and I'd be like, oh, I need to feel this, and it's like my ego would go towards it, and then there'd be this emotional like cat and mouse, that
Mm.
it's like the feeling would try and hide, but actually by relaxing out,
Yeah.
it was almost like it felt safe to come out and be felt, and it also
Yeah.
wasn't so overwhelming because it was only one fragment or smaller fragment of this much vaster experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is the difficulty with shadow work, of not getting stuck. So, like you say, because that can happen if you focus on the emotion, then there can be a stuckness and there can be a vibration of that energy, and so when I work with people, I don't do one-on-ones very often, but when I do work with people, I try to get them to acknowledge that that ball of energy is in their body, but then I try to get them to give it back to what I would call God. So you're giving it to that spaciousness. You're not, like, your way is slightly different. You're doing it the other way around. It's like by evoking that spaciousness, then that's accepted. But you're right. You're not staying in the ball of it. Like you're not, it's not, this too stuckness in the body. So there has to be this relaxing into a spaciousness. But you can do it other ways. So another way to do it is by doing yoga or body work, which then helps the energy come out in that way. Like, so there's different ways, but sometimes that doesn't work for some people. So there's different ways in which you can do it. And just paying attention when you're doing the body work. So you're being aware of it, but the body work helps that energy expand to an extent.
I've noticed when people talk about TRE though, and I love TRE. I love David. What a lovely energy. There can be still that desire to, for example, use TRE, not to get rid of it. And so intention, I think, can be quite important. You know, because if we want to get rid of it, that's not going to work.
No. And this is the other thing, is the quick fix, is this idea of quick fixes and get rid of, and it's really in the end embracing everything. So it's this end of this idea of constantly, I'm going to be in a different state, I'm going to be something else than what I am. I just want to give like a realistic perspective on my life as to what we were talking about doing body work and people I like wanting quick fixes. Like, so I would say that I sit in silence and meditate, not actively meditating. Sometimes I actively meditate, but generally just sitting there for like potentially somewhere, dependent on how much I have to do, between 4 and 8 hours a day. I eat well. I don't eat too much sugar or caffeine. I don't eat meat or dairy. I don't drink alcohol. I do smoke weed every so often, and I do take microdosing of psychedelics every so often, especially with my menopause symptoms. That really helps if you're in a legal country to do that. I do body work every day, so an hour of body work, potentially an hour of dancing or moving the body, so like listening to music and just letting the body move to music. And I don't really watch TV or YouTube. I switch my phone off, and I have an e-ink device that I use when I don't have to have my phone on. So it's like a small phone that's e-ink, so I can only really read books on it, listen to Audible, which I don't really do, except I have to learn German. And I have my German app on there, and I have my Telegram and WhatsApp on there. But I generally don't use it so much, and it's e-ink, so it's like, if you ever used a Kindle, whenever you do something, it takes ages. So like Kindle's always refreshing. It's a bit better than Kindle, but like I can't watch videos on there. But the other thing I do, what I mostly do, is listen to music. So in the evenings, I just generally listen to music. When I eat, I generally listen to music, but I try to eat, and I like to do everything with my breathing. So when I'm eating, I'm syncing it with my breath. So if people have an idea that they are going to like do a bit of non-duality or do a bit of this stuff, and then they're going to be able to go back to drinking, partying, going out, socializing, doing lots of crazy things that we think are happiness in the society, it's not true. Your body won't be interested in that. And every time you do something which is against health and mental sanity, you get calmer, and it becomes very obvious. That's just, so if I can't talk to people for too long a periods because I'll get calmer for it, because it's too mental. It's not like, we need a lot of silence, and our society is like the opposite of that. So this conversation is okay because we're speaking about non-duality, but if we were speaking about other stuff, I can speak about it, but it's limited. Like I can't go and like sit and speak for like 4 hours and catch up with a friend. Like I have to then have breaks in between because it's just I can feel it in the body. It's too much for the body. So this idea of like quick fix, that we're going to quick fix, do a bit of yoga and then we'll reach the state, and there is this shift that happens which is beyond the body, but then the body will constantly expand to that freedom. And the more and more the body expands to it, the less and less the body can do anything which isn't in line with that freedom. So that could potentially mean jobs going. Like I can't do too much mental stuff online. So, and there's no interest like to become really successful. All I need is enough to turn over in order to keep the body alive, because why would you want to stress your body in that way? Like it's it's often in the past been about being something or being better than, or an idea. You understand what I'm saying?
I absolutely do. That was one of the favorite excerpts of conversation I've ever had. That was wonderful. I'm really grateful for you sharing that. That really spoke to me, and I just think it's incredibly valuable. Yeah, that was very, very powerful. So thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
great.
nice.
Okay.
I don't often talk about that actually at all, of what my life is like. Like but it just, because you asked that question, it just suddenly came up. This
It was so valuable.
quick
No, I
fix.
loved it. I'm really grateful for you to share that, because I think sometimes non-duality and talking about it can be quite abstract. And so that was, to have a day in the life of was really powerful and beautiful. And I'm sure, that was a bit of a slap of for me. I've had some of the questions around some of the stuff I do of, things have dropped away for sure,
Yeah.
TV and lots of it, but still I make choices that I get karma for sure.
Yeah.
And so to have it, explained in such clear terms, that was really,
Yeah.
really, really lovely. And I'm conscious, obviously, even though we are talking about non-duality, I don't want to overburden you, because I know that it's a very precious energy you have, and it needs to be tended to. So to sort of move towards wrapping up, before we started recording, I said about how I was interested in that. Whenever I see you talk, you always tend to be sat on the floor, and you said, well, can you share what you said? Because I thought this was so interesting.
So yeah, it can come across as a bit strange, but my audience are used to me being strange, but to new people here. So when I give a talk, especially when I do it live in person, what happens is if the person looks in my eyes, I don't know what this is, and it's not me doing it or them doing it, it's just something that happens between us, is that the energy circulates. So it's like it comes out of the eyes and goes in the eyes and then comes down the body, and we circulate together. So our energies are going in this circular energy, and it's like a very strong feeling that I have. And it's like the eyes lock onto each other from the other side too. And this happens. And this is the ultimate position of sitting in with it, doing it. So I just got wires and tissues down, but I'll just bring the camera down. Is this position I have to sit. Oh,
Right.
the camera's gone upside down. So I have to sit with my legs crossed, facing people. When I'm doing,
Right. Yeah.
there we
Thank
go.
you.
Yeah, when I'm doing it live with people, I always wear a blanket over me so it doesn't look too inappropriate, that because my stomach sticks out too. I have to have the belly sticking out. So yeah, you can't really see it in the video. I have to properly stick my stomach out and have, my partner calls it the Buddha belly. Like I have to relax my jeans and let the belly hang out and then my legs split open like in this triangle position. and then the energy with the other person circulates the best. I can do it, or it happens also with the legs closed and sitting on a regular seat, but this is the ultimate position. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because that's, you know, a way a lot of the I'm not the the teachers sit. So it's all these things have reasons, eh? And it took me a while to work out that this is where it gets the strongest, when I sit like that, like like this. But sometimes I'm too lazy and then I rest against the wall.
Yeah. And you said that you watched one video, so from the third person point of view, and you could actually see the energy.
Yeah, so I never watch it because I'm normally always filmed in Zoom or something, or in this app where you're going from one person to the other. And then even when other people film me doing a live talk, they're normally always focused on me or the other person. But in this one video, we were both in the shot together, sitting next to each other. And I wasn't actually sitting in this position, but it started happening. And when I watched the video back, they sent it to me, I realized I can actually see it outside happening. I asked my partner, but my partner is really sensitive too, and he said he could see it in the video, but he says he can always see it happening. But, yeah.
And you know, when you work with people or when you speak to people, obviously there are the words and whatever, but it's that energetic
Yeah.
transference and
Yeah. And that might be the Shakti way of teaching, the feminine way of teaching, is that it's all about the energy.
yeah.
So it's like a bird call, you know, to stillness. And you know, you were saying about Tony Parsons, like some of the people that speak Neo-Advaita, like Tony Parsons, like really has this energy, but sometimes they're speaking it from the intellect and then it's not the same.
Yeah.
Like
It feels
it's
dry.
different. Yeah, it feels dry, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. You know, I've sometimes felt a little lonely around other people as well. It's like when there isn't, I suppose, that heart connection. You know,
Mm,
like I can sense that. Yeah. Anyway.
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'd love to keep talking to you. Is there anything you'd like to say or add?
There was something I wanted to add, but I've forgotten now. I remember thinking just before I spoke, but I've forgotten now.
Um,
It's gone.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a book.
in this video, I think that we could have really circled energy, but I was looking up at the camera instead of in your eyes because you're way down there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was
Same.
like, so we didn't really lock on. But every so often, I look at you and I can feel that we're beginning to lock on. But then I go back to the. It's a weird thing, this lock on thing.
Yeah. I mean,
It's like these two magnets.
I have to say, I've definitely felt it in my body. You know, like a warmth and sort of opening in my chest around my
Yeah,
heart, like for sure. Like that's been quite palpable for me.
yeah,
It's really lovely, actually. It's
yeah.
really, you know, it's super nice.
But it's a two-way thing. So for me, it also, when I lock on with someone, it's also super blissful for me. So it's like a two. It's like we're both. It's like we're both ping ponging that energy together, and
Yeah.
that's so blissful. Have you read the book, The 40 Rules of Love?
No, but I'm going to
So
write that down right now.
that's so beautiful, and it's my favorite novel. And it's about Shams and Rumi. Have you heard about the relationship between Shams and Rumi?
Oh, I haven't. No.
So it's about like Rumi's teacher. I don't know. Maybe it's, some people say it's made up. Some people say it's not made up. Not the book, but the story of the two. Like and 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 Shams, like he was a traveling Sufi. You know, these Sufis only stay in one place for one day and then they move on. And he was looking the earth over for somebody to recognize himself in, for someone to see emptiness. he didn't say it in those words, but that's what he was looking for. And then he eventually found Rumi, and although Rumi became a student at first, they began to really see each other. And like two shams, it was like the ultimate, like that was what his ultimate last desire was, to see himself in the other. So you could say like that's the maybe consciousness's goal in this, although who knows, is just to be able to see itself in itself.
Yeah. Do you know, that's prompted a quick question, actually.
Yeah.
You just said, who knows, right? And I think that's really lovely, because like, even with awakening and all that stuff, there's still so much people we can't know, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's still a great mystery.
Yeah.
I think too much certainty as well, and maybe to come back to the point about the masculine, because the masculine, that certainty can be quite attractive.
Yeah.
You know, we like certainty. It's like the reason people say they like, you know, authoritarian figures. Like, in times of uncertainty, someone who goes, "No, I know X, Y, Z."
Yeah.
It's quite reassuring. But actually, you know, even within this, there's so much we don't know, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And this is actually, to go back to my female point again, this is something that I feel that scares females when they see other females, because you know what we've been conditioned as females to do for thousands and thousands of years is to pick a man that is very certain, you know, and to pick this masculine energy that really knows. And this keeps us safe, you know, by picking someone that knows the environment, that can say this is the way it is. And so when we come across this not knowing, and it's like the essence of ourself, we're taught to be afraid of it. And this is like something that I feel like happens with females, and the male teacher as opposed to the female teachers. They're very attracted to this very strong knowing. Because they're afraid of that unknowing in themselves. They're afraid, and it's also back to thousands and thousands of years of the way in which we've lived.
Yeah.
And conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Important.
It's so beautiful, not knowing, and also to then like you know, you got all these wise words, and then at the end of it, you're like, but I'm not exactly sure. Like, who knows in the end? Like, so he's saying these seemingly wise things that come from all these traditions and these teachers, and then you're like, but yeah, and that can feel, some people feel very untrustworthy. But if you really reflect on it, is that untrustworthy, or is it being really adamant and really certain that this is right? Something also to be questioned. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes we do really know something, but it's just questioning it all and looking inwards. Like, what does this do for me?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think for me, I've really been attracted to that certainty up to a point, and now actually I find it a bit off-putting.
Yeah.
You know, I prefer that, the humility of saying, well, you know, I don't know for sure, you know,
Yeah.
and that even down to, for example, techniques, right? Some people say, oh, self-inquiry, but I know other people who say, oh no, like focused meditation, or nothing, you, I think being too wedded to a position, for me now, I find it a bit too
Yeah.
I'm not like a huge fan of that. So maybe it's a stage, you know.
Yeah. And also, as like a lot more of the focus and the storyline falls away, and the attention is resting more here, then it doesn't need that so much.
Yeah. Okay. Two last questions. One is just simply, has that thing popped back up into your head that you were going to say? It's
No,
gone.
because now we're locking on eyes rather than both looking at the camera. So now I'm getting more and more blissed out.
Yeah. That's lovely.
So it's even more gone.
Okay. Here's one last question then. So, when you, for example, are being filmed, so in a conversation like this, obviously it's a back and forth. So that spontaneity is, well, it's natural, isn't it? That's how people have conversations or whatever. But when you're just talking, obviously you're not. To what degree have you any idea what you're going to say?
None.
None. So it's being really open to that, to allow that to come through.
Yeah.
Otherwise it deadens it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Lovely. Beautiful. Well, listen, Lisa, all I can say is it's been just such a joy. Really lovely. Really, beautiful, beautiful. So it's been so nice to speak and meet with you, and thank you for sharing, including your day in the life of. I feel particularly privileged for that little bit. But just thank you and lots of love.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's really beautiful getting to know you. Yeah.